Namaste, namaste to all of you. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to begin first with an announcement, and that is that starting with our next satsang on next Tuesday, we will start to record some sections for upcoming courses, these courses in the basic skills of HeartSourcing. So this gives you a chance to participate in those courses for free and learn step by step these skills that allow us to make the mind quiet, to make it clear and peaceful, to dissipate emotional stress and find emotional harmony, and through all that open the pathway to the heart. And with the pathway of the heart comes the recognition of the true self. So these fundamental skills, each one of which has the power to liberate us. We will go over them step by step, systematically. I don't know how long it will take, but we will just record some of it each week. And then I also hope, if we have the time, I hope to engage with you in question and answers more than ever before. Because I really recognize that when you speak to me, whether you're online or here in person, it brings an immediacy to this conversation that is maybe sometimes lost if I allow whatever wants to be said to come through me without the stimulation of a conversation. So I want to just have you notice that, and it may also be very helpful if something comes up during the week to write it down and to bring it to the session on Tuesday. Because many times you're in the moment and maybe we've just done a meditation and your mind just can't find its way back to the question that may actually be important for us to discuss. We have to realize that when we're in this heart space, which we cultivate here, then it's very easy for us to just want to stay there. But it can also be a bit of an escape. Aside from being beautiful, it is an escape when we take that time not to deal with the issues that really the rest of the week have a tendency to keep us out of the heart. So in my personal experience, I was with one of my teachers for years, and whenever I sat in front of her, it was so powerful, her presence was so powerful that I just went brain dead, and I couldn't ever think of anything unless I had written it down. So I know this from personal experience, and to encourage you to see if it interests you. You can of course do whatever you want, but if it interests you, to tell us what you're dealing with, positive or negative. But we always get more mileage out of discussing the difficulties, because we really don't need to create the free being that we are. We don't need to create the love in us. It's already what we are. We need to remove the obstructions, the obstacles. So that's always our focus on our work. This is not at all negative work. It is a work of self-liberation. And so please understand that if you have something you're struggling with and you have the generosity to share that, to share your questions, to share with the rest of us what is going on in your life, you really contribute to everyone. Because no stressful thought, no negative emotion is a private affair. We all have the same stuff. We all have the same obstacles and problems. So when you bring up something that appears unique to you, just know that it isn't, and that everyone listening will be struggling in some way, large or small, with the same issue. And when you are around spiritual teachings for some time, you see that this is absolutely true. There's no new problem under the sun. And they're all recycled. We all have them. But by discussing specifics, discussing what it is that harms us or appears to harm us, we all can grow, we all can get more free. Okay? Thank you. And I want to start with something. I just opened the book. Nisargadatta Maharaj has become a wonderful teacher for me. And he writes, "Be aware of being conscious and seek the source of consciousness." And I would add, be aware of being love and seek the source of love. And I hear many people making distinctions between consciousness and love, but that's an artificial distinction, because you cannot have consciousness without love. It is empty. And you cannot have love without consciousness or wisdom. The Tibetans speak of wisdom and compassion. So you cannot have wisdom without compassion or love, because it would be mere knowledge and it would be not full. And you cannot have love without wisdom, because it would be attachment. It would be causing suffering, and that cannot be love. So love and wisdom are our true nature, and they are one and the same. Two manifestations of our true being. Now, be aware of being conscious and seek the source of consciousness. Be aware of being love and seek the source of love. That is all. Very little can be conveyed in words. It is the doing as I tell you that will bring light, not my telling you. And it's not about what I tell you, it's the skills that tell us, here's what we can do. They do not tell us, you should do that. They're just available. It is up to us. So there's no one waving a finger at you and saying you should, because that always creates resistance. Okay? So very little can be conveyed in words. It is, let me say it in my words, the practices that exist, that we can learn, that will bring light, not the letter of the practice. It is the action of the practice. The means do not matter much. It is the desire, the urge, the earnestness that counts. When you have that desire, that earnestness, the right means will come to you. I'm working with a wonderful woman in Australia now in my mentoring program, and she told me a number of different things of what she thought about spirituality and what this path was all about. And one after the other, my responses were just to show her that these particular practices or skills that she was being offered by the popular press did nothing to liberate her. And it was clear, but the whole field around her is filled with this, and everyone talks about this stuff, and everyone is into that. But it was her earnestness that not only helped her find me, could have been someone else, but she found me. It's someone who has been earnest in that search for some time. And most important, it was her earnestness that allowed her to hear what I had to say. Because there's an attachment to what we do, what we've learned, what we think is really cool and wonderful. But she immediately saw that it was not helpful. And there's many things like that out there, and things that enhance the personality. But an enhanced personality is not free. It's simply an increased state of pleasure for a while that will end again. For us to become free, we need to find a different path. We need to go deeper. We need to find the source of consciousness and of love. That is the depth of who we are. So, any questions? Any comments? Please.
I've been experiencing something this week because I've been practicing for a while, and I've become, I don't know if the word is adept, but I can go into my heart quite often when I want to bring myself back to that place. But it felt like this week that I realized that what I'm doing is when I do that, I'm shutting my brain down. And I'm doing it so much that I feel like my brain is almost becoming like gray matter. And I had this thought this week that I feel like I need to take that light from my heart cave and start bringing it up into the physical brain area and head area so that when thoughts do appear, they appear in a field of light instead of the almost dark mass that's been shut off for a while. Is that?
Well, beautiful. That is just another application of what we do in open attention, in heart sourcing per se. So now, first of all, your brain is made out of gray matter. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's just simply the physical material of the brain that's called gray matter, right? But you're speaking about gray thoughts, correct?
I've just shut it down. I've learned to just shut my brain down and bring it all into my heart, which is beautiful. But what happens is when I have to use my brain and my head for something that's going on in life, it's almost like a jolting.
It's jarring.
It's jarring. And I feel like I need to open that, bring that light up throughout all of me. So that when things come in, they're coming into the light.
Right. Well, first of all, really appreciate, and I know you do, appreciate how you've learned to come into the heart. That is not an easy matter. Most people really struggle with this. I remember a woman some years back. I had a course, an online course that was a 6-week intensive course, and she went through it, and every day there was a new heart sourcing meditation right at the beginning of the day, and then more. And she said she did them faithfully, and she could not feel the heart ever, except for twice, she said, and that changed her life, those 2 times, right? But that's what most people are struggling with, real barriers around the heart. And you had that too, but you were able to really find your way into that. Now, your whole being has not yet been transformed from that love, and that takes some time. We have to realize that we're dealing with lifetimes of conditioning, and we don't even need to think about that or believe that. This lifetime is enough. And all that conditioning, these old habits and memories, need to be sort of softened and steeped in that essence of the heart. And then they can let go their fear-based sense of holding. Now, the mind, the thinking mind, I should say, is really an instrument to a very large extent created from fear. When we're children, at first we're in a bliss world because we don't even think yet. We're just in that heart, in that state of being. That's why when you look at a baby, you have this type of experience. But then we start to have that tear in our world. The tear where we begin to perceive ourselves as separate from mother, separate from the natural way of being nurtured and cared for. And we begin to perceive a hostile, difficult world, a world we don't understand. And so we start to think. And that comes playfully to children, but behind it is this need to survive in this world of multiplicity. And so a big part of the thinking mind is that, how am I going to be safe here? It's deeply ingrained in it. And it doesn't have to be that way. Not every mind is like that. A mind that has really been worked with is a mind that knows again, and deeply now, not as a child, you just live in it, but you're not really conscious of it. The baby and the sage aren't all that far apart from each other. The baby lives in that safety of still being one with the mother, with the mother world. And the sage, on the other spectrum of life, lives in that again. But where the baby is not conscious of that state of oneness, the sage is conscious of it, right? And our path is this cycle from that to this. And so the openness of your heart, the ability to feel that essence, and then allow it to radiate from there into whatever part of you needs it, whether it's the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, the causal body, all of these parts of us can be enriched and nurtured by that essence of the heart. So by all means, let it come back to the mind. Yeah.
I get nervous then, so I'm like, oh my God, if I start spreading it and taking it out of my heart, and is it going to lose the essence of what it is in my heart, that fullness? Am I going to lose that ability to go to that place so easily by bringing it up into where my thoughts are created?
So, I hear a little bit that you tend to escape from your mind into the heart.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry about it, first of all, because you're escaping to the one place that is truly safe.
Am I okay staying in that place all the time, or is it important to
You tell me. What does your intuition, your intuitive mind tell you there?
It feels peaceful when I'm there. That's all it is. It's
exactly.
Complete peace.
Right.
When I start going up there, which I've been doing this week, it's not as peaceful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go there on purpose.
Okay.
You can,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have to.
Okay.
And you will naturally be required by life to use your thinking mind. And when that happens, if there is some kind of difficulty with that, just notice it and see if you can combine the awareness of the thinking mind and the awareness of the heart, where you don't have to leave this space to deal with your thoughts. The thoughts may not be loving. The thoughts may have some type of tension in them. But does that mean you have to lose the space of the heart? The space of the heart is also the space of the witness that can just watch those thoughts, And that is, of course, the secret, that we don't fight any aspects of our being, but just observe them. Just like we do with open attention. We don't push it away, we don't try to control the emotions or the body sensations. We just observe them. Let me see if I find something here.
It occurs to me that also when we decide to deal with the mind, that's an act of love as well. So we
Absolutely.
are already engaging.
Yes. Exactly what you're saying
heart.
About going into the mind is bringing that love into the mind, into the thought base. And don't forget that this is just the thinking mind. that the mind also has its intuitive intelligence, its intuitive capacities, which help you exactly in observing the stream of thoughts itself. And you don't have to change them, like I said, but observe them and be conscious of them. And if some stressful thoughts appear and reappear, then put them on a worksheet and do the work with them. You know the skills, and because you've used the skills, you're now capable of being so beautiful in your heart. I mean, the stories when you were in LA and kept writing of how you went through everything you went through and it just didn't touch you, it was just wonderful. It was wonderful, and that's exactly the outcome of this work. So your words just sort of triggered this. There's another section here where Nisargadatta speaks about open attention. Of course, he didn't use the words open attention, that's my invention, but he speaks about the principle that we're using here, and I want to say that in response to what you're doing, or what you're saying, because the ego mind now has created a dichotomy between pleasure and pain, in your case, right? Oh, when I'm in my thoughts, it's difficult. When I'm in the heart, it's pleasurable, right? And so you fall naturally into that place of running away from pain and running toward pleasure, right? So he writes, the questioner says, pain is not acceptable. Maharaj says, why not? Did you ever try? Do try, and you will find in pain a joy which pleasure cannot yield, for the simple reason that acceptance of pain takes you much deeper than pleasure does. Now, this is not a joy of superficial ha ha ha. This is a joy of the soul. And this is wonderful to read these words because they just enrich my own understanding and my own teaching of open attention. The personal self, which is the ego self, is by its very nature constantly pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. It's just its nature. We need to know. It always does that. The ending of this pattern is the ending of the ego self. I'm adding the word ego because he says self and it's confusing with our language. So the ending of this pattern of seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, is the ending of the ego self. The ending of the self, the ego self, with its desires and fears, enables you to return to your real nature, the source of all happiness and peace. So this opening to pain, this opening to the uncomfortable body sensations when there's a negative emotion. In your case, the opening also to the discomfort of the mind, right? And allowing that, being attentive to it, it removes sort of the nurturing soil in which the ego grows. And with that, the ego dissipates. The perennial desire for pleasure is the reflection of the timeless harmony within. This is interesting, huh? The perennial desire for pleasure is the reflection of the timeless harmony within. We are harmony, and therefore we seek pleasure because it mirrors that deeper harmony. But it's like saying, I love you to the picture in the face in the mirror instead of to the real person. So when you chase pleasure, you don't get the real thing. It's the reflection, not the real thing. It is an observable fact that one becomes self-conscious only when caught in the conflict between pleasure and pain. which demands choice and decision. But then you have to do something. It is this clash between desire and fear that causes anger, which is the great destroyer of sanity in life. I love the way his words are just up and right to it. Anger is the great destroyer of sanity in this life. This is so important for us to know. So we find anger. It's such a powerful and painful emotion that wants to continue itself. Remember when you're angry, and damn it, I'm right. Right? And you want to hold on to that because it gives you this false sense of power. It empowers the ego. It is the great destroyer of sanity. When pain is accepted for what it is, a lesson and a warning, and deeply looked into and heeded, the separation between pain and pleasure breaks down. Both become experience, painful when resisted, joyful when accepted. So can we accept pain? Now everything in the ego says, no, 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 I ain't gonna do it. Pain sucks. But when we do accept it and open and pay full attention to it, when we have that courage, in small or big amounts, however we can, then that pain undergoes a transformation. And it sets us free from being caught in this dichotomy, this duality of pleasure and pain. So it goes on, but
I have a question here.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
Please.
You are?
Mm-hmm.
Ravindra says, most of us use our mind in this world, in our work in life. How can we change patterns of using the heart? I guess for using the heart, he meant.
You don't, Ravindra, you don't have to change your use of the mind unless the mind comes up with stressful thoughts. The mind in itself, the thinking mind, is a good tool for practical things. When you want to fix a machine, you need to use your thinking mind, right? When it comes to somewhat more difficult things, like how to have a working relationship with someone else, there the mind is also useful, but you have to go to the deeper mind, the intuitive mind, the heart. And you will notice that when there are stressful thoughts, that's what gets in the way. So to get to the heart, to get to the harmony within you and your relationships with others and yourself and the world, you need to simply identify the stressful negative thoughts. For that, the best tool is the work of Byron Katie, where we have these wonderful worksheets. It becomes quite simple to fill out a worksheet and go through the inquiry. If you need directions of how to find some of this material and how to do it, just write us an email and we can get that to you. The basic teaching of that is available for free on the web. The use of the work of Byron Katie really benefits from the ability to have a calm mind, because with a certain amount of stillness, and meditation is the primary tool for that, but stillness is arrived to in many different ways. Through that stillness, we gain the basic ability to see what is going on inside of us, because sometimes we have so many stressful thoughts and one is chasing the other. If we don't cultivate some stillness, it's hard to tease out what we actually need to work with. And on the other hand, open attention is extremely helpful, because when you deal with stressful thoughts, you also are dealing with negative emotions, because one creates the other. And so to know what to do with negative emotions in the same breath as you may be doing the work on clearing your mind just deepens the whole process, the whole practice.
We talked about the patterns of using the heart. How can you use your heart in a daily environment, at work, in life?
Right. Well, the heart is the presence of the very core of our being, and is always present. The question is, do we have access to it? And to have that access is actually tremendously simple, although I spoke about this example of the lady who took my course a little while ago, and there you see that it can be very walled in, very blocked. But most people have some cracks in that armor, and you can come into the heart in a moment between activities during the day, taking some breaths, letting your focus come into the heart, and finding that stillness, anchoring yourself in that. And finding the nurturance that is here, if it's just for a moment. And of course, you can practice it with the skills of HeartSourcing. Let me ask you how you would answer that from your experience.
I would say, and especially after the conversation we just had here, it made it even more simple, really. It's just, as long as you are in your heart, then everything that kind of comes from that is going to come from a loving, wise place. And so functioning in the real world is going to be different just because you're coming from that place of peace and love. So it's what I was doing. What happens if a thought comes in? You're not going to know. It's all about the moment and being in the heart, and everything will be exactly as it should be if you're coming from that place.
Now, of course, you're already speaking from a place after quite a bit of practice, right? So it's easy for you to get past the sort of lineup of stressful thoughts and find the heart, because you've practiced that. So, it's all a matter of finding your way into the heart. And again, the first thing I read of Nirjagatta's book is about this commitment, this earnestness, this desire to really be in that space of reality inside of you. It's also funny to me how often I speak to people. I was just at a business meeting last week, and in the business environment, it's very difficult for most people to understand what the value is of having access to the heart. But then I had to talk to a woman. This was sort of a difficult business kind of deal just a few days ago. And I just didn't let myself be influenced by the thought, oh, this is a difficult proposition, a difficult thing I have to do here. And I just started speaking to her. And we developed this really warm and wonderful connection because I was open. And I so remember how I would have dreaded these kind of conversations before, but that just wasn't there anymore. And I just connected with her, and the woman went out of her way to help me. It was like incredibly touching. And that's what happens when you connect through the heart with people in any environment. So whether it's family or business, everything runs easier. People respond to that. Not everyone, but overall, people respond to that when you're open. Anyone else? Okay, then I'm just ready to make another mistake here. because I had an experience this morning in meditation that was so wonderful, and I should just be like some other spiritual teachers who teach what they've known for a long time, and they're very established in it, and they can present it in a very rounded and complete way. But I just can't help it. I'm very excited about what's sort of new for me, and I want to share it, so I will. So forgive me if it doesn't come out in a totally mature form yet. So what I'd like you to do, well, I first should tell you what I've been doing in my last 2 or 3 weeks in the mornings when I used to wake up in the morning. And I used to do this years ago, and it's just come back to me to do it that way because there's a need for it in my life. And this is to do open attention early in the morning when you have just awoken and you're still in bed, you haven't moved around a whole lot, so that your body and mind are not stimulated yet. So you're still just like in this semi-asleep, no, you're awake, but in this semi-resting state, excuse me. And, no, it's okay, it's okay. And then I noticed that there was some discomfort in my gut. Could just kind of disregard it. Every time when I would get up, it's immediately gone. So I could just disregard it. It's just a little digestible thing or something like that, right? But I know better than that, my own internal mechanisms. So I focus on it. I do open attention. I go into it, or try to. And it's not always so easy because these old things that turn out to be emotional complexes, they often don't want to be seen. They have lived in the secrecy of repression and the subconscious for a long time. And they sort of feel at home there. And you don't have a conscious grasp on this, but I know that it has to do with some subtle anxiety. And subtle doesn't mean small. It's like a gross weapon, for instance, is a club like the cavemen used. So they take the club, they hit you over the head, you feel it right there. That's a gross weapon. Right? A weapon that uses very subtle power might be a nuclear bomb. It just splits atoms. You know how much more powerful that is? You see, so subtle means, in a sense, more powerful. But we feel it in subtle ways. And as we proceed on the spiritual path, we find more and more subtle ways that we're stuck. So I'm focusing on this upset in my tummy. Not a big deal at all, but I can feel it. And I get this sense that it's somehow connected to some ancient anxiety. And I have now, for the last 2.5 weeks, just focused on this every morning. And it's like this wonderful challenge for me to really bring my attention there, even though it's a bit like Teflon. It doesn't want to be seen, and it rejects that effort for me to bring my attention into it, because then it also would dissolve. So this is still part of my pain body, of my ego self, right? And it resists. The ego always resists any kind of spiritual effort. So I bring it down there, and morning after morning, I can go a little bit deeper, just a little bit, tiny little bit, not a big difference yet, tiny little bit deeper. But whenever you do, there is this sense of joy that something is dissolving, just like he was just saying, right? And then I'm sitting in meditation this morning. And so now I'm going to just talk to you about that to see if you can intellectually follow that And it's like showing you a map of a possibility of what you can actually experience in your meditation, whether that happens today or 3 years from now, it doesn't really matter. So you become really still. And in that stillness, you realize that this character, in my case, the Ramgiri character, in your case, the character that bears your name, that character is experienced in your consciousness, is it not? And that character is experienced in your consciousness, and the whole world in which this character lives is also experienced in your consciousness. Is it not? So this world and the character of the I lives inside of your consciousness. And so does everyone else, including this Ramgiri character, lives inside of your consciousness. So I'm internal to you, and so is everything else. Follow me so far? Okay. Now, if that Ramgiri character, please use your own name, lives inside of my consciousness, then it is my own creation. And this consciousness that created this Ramgiri character in his world, this consciousness creates with love. Because like we said before, consciousness and love, wisdom and compassion can never be really two things. So then, I look from that consciousness at this Ramgiri character, whom I, as that consciousness, create, and I realize that I can embrace him with this great love that is greater than this little character. That great love that permeates his whole world. And that with that love I can ease or remove from him these remnants of anxiety he feels, this sense of insecurity, or whatever it may be for you, this depression, this fear, this grief, this addiction, this conflict. This consciousness which contains this little character of you has immense powers. It creates this body, mind, personality. And then what happens is the creator gets lost in his or her creation and thinks, I am this little character living in a stressful world filled with insecurities and sadness and conflict. And I fear that world, and I desire what I want. And meanwhile, this great consciousness out of which it all comes, and in which it all exists, allows this play, this drama of life. But it's always there waiting. When will this character awaken to his or her unreality, to the unreality of the fears and desires and confusions that constitute that little life. When will this character awaken to the great love that gave birth to him or her, and is giving birth to him or her every moment? When will this little character realize that it is created by its self? So this is just a story. And there's of course a big understanding between, a big difference between hearing something, understanding something in the mind, and actually having the experience. But in order to go onto some kind of a trip along a certain pathways, we first have to have somebody tell us about this path. And then we might get curious to follow it. And what I'm saying is simply another way of saying that there is this great love in us, this great wisdom that can heal everything and free us from all our burdens. We were so touched when we heard Robin Williams' death. A man who gave so much joy to so many millions of people, and then apparently suffered from such dreadful depression. There comes a point when these forces, when they're unrestrained, become so powerful that the being doesn't know how to protect itself from itself any longer. But just to know that this shadow can be completely conquered, that the shadow itself only arises within the light of the self. That the light of the self envelops everything, good and bad, light and dark. That light is so much greater. To know that can give us courage and can allow us to approach these matters of what scares us, of our own darkness, and approach them so skillfully and so early without waiting for them to become so big. We can approach them now, and it will save us tremendous suffering. We do not need to wait until we're desperate. When we're desperate, everyone reaches out for help. But why wait for that? It makes no sense. Except that you don't have the earnestness, the commitment, the desire to be free, because life is good. Dealing with pleasure cannot take us as deep as dealing with pain. But we need to deal with pain with wisdom. And it can be undone. Are there any other questions? Any other comments? Okay.
I find that attachments prevent, at least for myself, from being present with what is
Mhm.
and prevent you from being one with who you are, because you're so brainwashed to do whatever you have to do to please those attachments.
Attachment is the big poison. And attachment, just to make it clear, in psychology uses the word attachment to speak about certain types of love, like the attachment between a mother and a child. That's of course very natural and very necessary. That as a loving relationship, and when there's problems, then there are problems. However, you're already aware, of course, of the use of the word attachment as clinging to things, you know. As in all things, what is needed is your acute awareness of the attachment. The more you can focus on it, like, do you have an example of what you're attached with that you want to share?
Well, it would have been at one time my attachment to my dog that recently passed away, or it could be my father who was very controlling, and my whole life was spent trying to make sure that attachment with him was okay.
Well,
And
so
it would be things also, because we're brought up to think that we need certain things, which we don't.
right. Well, what is bothering you about these issues now? You're speaking about them like in the past.
Well, I feel like a sense of relief that I don't have them anymore, almost. I feel guilty about feeling that way, yet I do feel free.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with feeling free. There is something wrong with feeling guilty, right?
Yeah.
So maybe your work is on a much more subtle level than you think. You know, work with that guilt which is created in the mind. And it's like, don't be surprised, however. You know, it's like ice fishing. You know, you cut a hole in the ice on the lake in the winter, and you lower down your hook and bait, and you don't know what's going to quite come up, right? But have the courage to do it. So start with working with the guilt, and be open and have this desire to know whatever it is that is making you not yet enlightened. You know, it's there. How do you know you're not enlightened? You don't love everything absolutely. Baron Katie has the line, when they're coming to kill you and you don't love them 100% yet, your work isn't done. Right? So that's the measuring stick, right? But in that state, of course, we don't experience reality the way we do now, as separate entities within a physical universe. When you're in that state, you really have a sense of profound mystical oneness with everything. It's not like you're here and they're there. You're all of it, right? So then that has already very shifted, very much. However, now find that desire for your freedom, for your enlightenment. You already have it. Just, you know what you do when you have a glowing coal and you want to have a blazing fire and you just have one coal? You do two things. You put on dry things like sticks and branches and leaves and stuff. What do they represent? Your attachments, your little problems, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And then you take one of those, what do you call those things that make this airflow? There's like a word for those things. I can't think of it now, right? You get air to shoot into that coal to make it hotter, right? That's practice. For instance, pranayama practice, right? Right? just to heat up that inner fire, that inner yearning for desire. To meditate like this, doesn't have to be pranayama. To do any of the skills we use here, but really do them, practice them. Create a daily structure for yourself, like you already have in many things. You get up in the morning, you don't stay in bed all day, you brush your teeth, you put on your eyeliner probably, you have breakfast, you do certain things. Just add some things. You have a great blessing. You have time of leisure. There's people, single mothers who are doing 3 jobs to feed their kids and stuff like this. They don't have that leisure time, right? You have that. You can use that. And just focus your whole being, say, the Easterners have it easier because they're raised in an awareness of multiple lives. And with that comes the recognition that we've done this business of life over and over and over and over again. And they also have an advantage because suffering and death is not hidden in that society as it is here. So the corpses are taken through the streets on open stretchers, often put on the pyre and burnt. And it smells like a big barbecue. And you can see the fat dripping from the bones and the skulls pop. And it becomes very real. We see, this is how I too am going to end up. And suffering likewise is not hidden, where you see lepers on the street and beggars and all of that. So in India, in a sense, you're much more in touch with life. But it's here as well as there. The Buddha spoke of the inevitability of sickness, old age. And when you think about multiple lives, in this one life idea, we can say, oh, well, I'm just going to ignore that. And everything will be fine, right? But it won't. In every lifetime, there's a great deal of suffering, and even often what we consider joy, compared to the deep bliss of what we truly are, it's still suffering. Even the pleasurable moments that tick-tack, go from pleasure to pain, pleasure to pain, pleasure to pain. We have to realize that there is always suffering in life. And we all have some sense, some taste of the great bliss of the heart, or we wouldn't be listening to this. We wouldn't be here. So if you have even a small taste of that, hold on to that, because it shows you a little, gives you a glimpse of the reality of your being. Hold on to that. Want it with every fiber of your being. And, very important, hang out with like-minded people. Stay in satsang, in the companionship of spiritual people. Because who we spend time with has a profound influence on us. It rubs off. So that's what I can tell you. And when you're ready to go deeper in your own search, you will be supported in that. But it's like love, it doesn't force itself. You have to ask for it. All the love, the love of God, the love of Christ is there. The peace of the Buddha is there for all of us. It's waiting. It's been waiting. It's been waiting for how many lifetimes? And we're still busy running around, doing all kinds of other stuff. Yeah, wait, I'm busy. Until we've had enough of it. And then it will be there. It will be there to embrace us. Just like in this little exercise I just talked us through, you know. This love is what has created you, in which you create yourself, your true self, the cosmic self that you are, is creating that little puppet of your personality that's walking through life in its own world. But that, what creates you with enormous love. When we were out in Taos with our Satsang, my Guru Satsang, and Krishnadas spoke about this. He spoke about unbearable love. Unbearable love, which we've experienced with our Guru. But love is not unbearable. What's unbearable is that we make ourselves so small that when we're faced with a love that is boundless, there's truly no limit, we find it unbearable. It's unbearable to the small personality we think we are. But that's like a bad dream. We are that love. We are that peace that is beyond understanding. So let yourself be inspired by your own recognition of even small moments of that. I had one student once who, I asked her if she ever had a spiritual experience. She couldn't think of anything. Then I made the question simpler. I said, was there ever a time, or is there ever a time, when you feel more peaceful, more in the flow, more at ease than at other times? And said, yeah, in the afternoons when I go and I float in my pool, I feel really peaceful. She was a very anxious person. Anxiety was always there, except in those moments. And she got it. It was no big deal. It was no like some grand spiritual experience. It was just a state of peace, slight state of peace. But it was enough. It made her so hungry. She said, I want this all the time. And it motivated her to practice. That's the big difference. Words are enough. We've all heard more than enough words. It's time to practice. If you don't know what to practice, get instructions, get somebody to help you. It's all available. Practice for the sake of the freedom of your soul.
Let's practice.
Yeah. Well, let me invite you to come to our next, probably quite a few Tuesdays. And you're more than welcome to invite your friends or tell them about it. We're going to create courses. We will start with Quiet Mind. And we go through a series of experiences together that give us the basic ability to live in a much better way, to release the roots of the shadow, the roots of our pain, and to live increasingly out of the heart. I'm very excited about this journey, and please understand that whenever you're here online or in person, you really tangibly contribute to this product, to this teaching. Because we thought to do it in a studio here, but we realized it's just not the same as doing it with you live, because we all do this together. You're participation, even though I may be talking, but your participation in listening is at least 50% of that. It pulls out what needs to be known. And I thank you for that. Any last question? Okay. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.